Any sinner is capable of being a great saint, and any saint is also capable of being a great sinner. The secret, therefore, of character development is the realization of this power that there is in each and every one of us, for good and for evil. And the good Lord would have us lay hold of what is worst in ourselves. Do not think that people who have virtue and kindness and other great talents just came by these things naturally. They had to work at them very hard.
Welcome to Ascend with Virtue. I'm your co-host, John Sablon.
And your co-host, Keone Sablon.
Yep, the two Sablons coming at you. Great to be back with you on this follow-up to our premiere, Keone. I was pretty excited. I don't know about you, but to get this kicked off and to join the Virgin Most Powerful Radio family. What about you?
Yeah, I'm excited to start this journey with the listeners in something that I think is needed out there, and it's a different flavor, from what radio shows tend to be. So I'm excited to start this journey with all the listeners.
Yeah, it's great to obviously be here as a father-son duo, right? I think something that we probably both didn't think about was going to be in the cards for us. As far as cards, I don't even know why I'm saying that, was in God's will or divine plan for us. But here we are, something that I think is near and dear to both our hearts, especially when it comes to the idea of Thomistic psychology and what we know and have seen and experienced, honestly, the transformative understanding of that. And I think in our own lives and the lives of those that we walk with. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think Thomistic psychology, and we'll get into that, of course, for all the listeners and what that really is. But Thomistic psychology was like, it's like a gem that has been just kind of hidden and, caught amongst some dirt, and everybody's been walking past it, didn't know it was there, right? In the church and in the world, even in the modern mental health arena. And, when we rediscovered what Thomistic psychology is and embrace it into the work that we do, the effects have been, dramatically present, and I think even more prominent because of the idea that Thomistic psychology is the understanding of the human person, right? This is it. This is the wisdom of the church, right? Telling us, here's the blueprint, folks. If you want to grow, if you want to be holy, right, you need to know yourself, as we talked about in the last show. And Thomistic psychology gives the answer.
Yeah, what's interesting, being in the corporate world, I know you've been, working in the counseling practice, but I know for myself now, going on, it was 25 years in kind of corporate America, and I had like 6 years of like kind of distribution experience. But in the corporate world specifically, there's all these little personality assessments, right? There's the DISC profile, and you have just these different ways of trying to assess the human person, like you said, to be able to try to understand the differences that we have, the way that we're designed. So we will talk about temperaments. I'm sure we're going to be talking about that in some way, shape, or form, and do a deeper dive probably in an episode as well. But it's interesting to me where all of these assessments, personality assessments, and where people are trying to get a better understanding of self, especially when you think about modern pop psychology, they fall short of what the great angelic doctor has come up with, and obviously building on Aristotelian philosophy. But that's a part that I know I've always kind of, as I've been journeying along this path, and the excitement that I have for what we're doing at Servium Institute and what we plan on doing with this show, is like where everybody else misses, Aquinas just nails it, right? And I think that's what we're excited about sharing with the listeners, right?
Absolutely. You think about psychology. In order for it to be a valid science, you need to properly understand the object or subject that you are studying. And where does modern psychology get it wrong from the very beginning is they don't understand the human person. They do not recognize the role or even the existence of the soul, right? And when you do that, when you don't acknowledge the soul, well, you don't really understand the person. And how can you actually have a valid science and actually seek to help and improve the whole human person when you don't even acknowledge the existence of the soul? And that's, again, where St. Thomas gets it right on, right? And we want to make sure that our listeners understand what true mental health formation looks like, so that we can take the tools, the wisdom of St. Thomas, merge it with modern evidence-based science-backed tools to now apply it so that we can ascend through virtue.
Mhm. So let's talk a little bit, because we were, as we're preparing for this show, we were definitely talking about the challenges with mental health today and the issues with modern psychology. But you talked about, being a body soul composite, and I think there's a lot of focus on body, as we were talking about even in our last show, the superficiality of it. And where modern psychology misses is on the soul. And just pulling from, I'm going to go to a quote from Pope St. John Paul II. And when he was addressing psychologists back in 1994, he had said that mental health and moral health are inseparably linked. A conscience darkened by sin can never be fully at peace. So mental health and moral health are inseparably linked. A conscience darkened by sin can never be fully at peace. So think about that in the context of what, especially, I'm thinking about, and for the listeners out there, Keone's a licensed marriage family therapist on top of a coach. My wife is also a licensed professional clinical counselor. Our daughters and Keone's sister is also an LMFT. So there's a lot of work going on in the Sablon household when it comes to trying to help people find peace, heal from wounds, heal from traumatic events, and really rediscover themselves. But when we think about the challenge, and I do want to go into some of the stats, we want to, in this first segment or two, we were going to talk about like kind of what is the stats showing us relative to mental health and the issue with people having mental health issues. And then in particular, Keone, just the problems with that. But anything else to speak on? Just, JP2 in that quote is obviously drawing the level of peace somebody can feel, but that mental health is intrinsically tied and inseparable from moral health. Mm-hmm. Whereas we see a lot in today, especially in psychology and modern day counseling, where you would almost think that they're leading you off the cliff, right? Mm-hmm. Encouraging you off the cliff. What say you on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, just go back to what Jesse was talking about in his show earlier this morning about the shooting, the recent shooting, right? Mm-hmm. And there's exhibit A of mental health and moral health being intimately connected. When the mind is corrupted, darkened by sin, darkened by an absence of reality, right? When you, through environment, through your own volition, through our distorted nature, etc., when we act those decisions out based off of that starts to have an effect on what you do moving forward. Mm-hmm. It starts to have an effect on what you think is true, what you think is good, what is beauty. And as a result, you start to go against God's will, God's plan. And then you start to see moral issues, right? To the point where I can justify whatever I think, right? And so because there's mental issues, because as I talked about in our first show about those faculties, those parts underneath the hood, right? Because those parts aren't operating as they should, well, then morality is out the window. Right now, you can't really drive the car in the direction you may want to, right? Because it's pulling you away from what is morally good, because it's starting to get corrupted, right? So I think the more we understand the intimate connection between mental health and moral health, the more we can better understand what St. Thomas is talking about that body-soul composite, and how to actually grow and heal as a result of that understanding.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about this problem now. Again, I know it's a global issue, but let's just talk about from some of the studies that we were seeing. We saw even a rise from like the studies that the National Alliance on Mental Health or mental illness put out in 2021, where they said 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year. So that equates to about 57 million people annually. Yet a study the following year in 2022 by the National Institute of Mental Health reported that 23.1% of adults experience any kind of mental illness, which equates to about 59 million. So we obviously are seeing this rise. We know that we're seeing issues in all the demographics that we work with, but I think about young people in particular who are experiencing a rise in mental illness. If you think about, just the level of, I think the top 4 killers of our children today between the ages of 14 and 24, I know the one is like accidents, and then you have essentially suicide, homicide, and then substance abuse. So we just see all of this disorder around us, and it's alarming, right? The number of people that are experiencing mental health, and then of course, and then our youth, right? So what is it that when we think about those stats, Keone, what is it that what does that tell us in today's world? And when we want to educate our listeners on the issue of mental health today.
Well, one, it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And two, the resources out there are not good. Mm-hmm. And I think there's even a problem within the church, right? Because, we have a Catholic institute. We work with Catholics, mm-hmm. right? So if it wasn't a problem within the church, we would be out of business.
Right.
Right. And so it is a problem within the church. Here's the thing. They've been so disillusioned, and maybe rightly so, by modern psychology, by what therapy is, that they've used that now as their ticket to continue on their pathway, which may lack the natural formation to cooperate with their spiritual formation. I'm assuming they are spiritually formed. I know a lot of the listeners are probably very well spiritually formed. Mm-hmm. But the natural formation, who is the human person, and how do I overcome my vices by cooperating with God's grace practically every day? How do I do that? Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think, one, yes, mental health is a clear issue. It is a problem even within the church, right? Within marriages, within families, right? Within youth, within the church, right? So what do we need to do? Well, we need to understand what the church says mental health is, so that we can cooperate with this process.
Yeah, I think we're going to break it open. I think this episode I'm excited about, just to be able to talk about mental health, the issues with it, and what we're going to do to solve that. So we'll be back after the break to talk more about mental health crisis and what we can do about it.
Here's a great way to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. You have an old car you want to get rid of, motorcycle, RV, or boat? Simply call 855-500-7433, and when they sell that vehicle, a portion of that money comes right back to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. It's an easy way to do it. I want to thank you for it. Call 855-500-7433. God love you and your family.
This is a catechetical minute from Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Just as the gestation of our first birth took place in water, so the water of baptism truly signifies that our birth in the divine life is given to us in the Holy Spirit. Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 694. The most basic elements of human life are often the actual tools that God uses in our relationship with Him. Water is one such element God has used, from the flood, to the Red Sea, to the Jordan River. Father, you have made all things with this in mind. May we recognize these signs of your love in creation.
This has been a catechetical minute from Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Terry Barber here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I'm encouraging people to support realestateforlife.org. They'll have a pro-life agent for you. California's laws for the family are really bad. If you have a young family and you can afford to get out of California, get out and make a new life somewhere where you're not going to have the repressive laws. For example, if your son wants to change his sex and you don't want that to happen, the school can take your child away from you. Yes, that's how bad it is, folks. That's why I'm encouraging you to go to realestateforlife.org. God bless you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
A well-ordered mind is to be preferred above all earthly goods. Spoken from the great Saint Augustine in Confessions. If somebody knew about some disordered passions and mental health issues, Keone, that would be one saint. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I love that quote. I think, yeah, something we can ponder probably
Yeah, and I think
deeper.
about, when we think about what we're trying to achieve here. So we were talking about the issues, the kind of mental health crisis we're experiencing as a country, but we know as a globe as well. One of the things I think it would be helpful for our listeners to understand, we want to kind of move into some of the formation. We want to talk about the faculties, which we'll get there. But we also introduced in our last show to the listeners about kind of how we were trained underneath Father Chad Ripperger, that team. We're talking about the Liberal Christian Protocol and the connection, the psychological compatibility with the diabolical influence, all of that, which I think helped formed kind of what we see. But we never even talked about the name Servium Institute, right? Where does Servium come from, Keone?
Yeah. So, it goes way back to my time at Franciscan University. And I was a part of Center for Leadership on campus. And as a part of your senior year kind of final hoorah project, your job as a leader on campus is to create some sort of event on campus for the students, the student body. And so what I wanted to do was put together a men's conference on campus for the students to be lit on fire for the faith. And so I brought you, the man on fire. I brought my dad, John Zablon, and I also brought Deacon Harold Burke Sivers, who is another on fire speaker.
Shout out to Deacon Harold.
Yeah, definitely. The dynamic deacon. We brought him out as well. And as I was, putting this all together, it was like, okay, we need a title for this event, this talk. And I don't even remember how it came to me. Just the idea of I will serve is what stood out to me. It just kind of came to my mind because we know that, the devil said, non serviam, right? I will not serve.
Mm-hmm.
And to kind of look at that and flip it on its head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's often attributed to what St. Michael the Archangel said, although I don't think that's confirmed. But it's attributed to him as saying the opposite. He said, servium, I will serve. And that's kind of our rally cry, to be able to say, hey, in the work that we are doing, it is to serve Mother Church. It's in the work that we do in integrating this work in our own lives, it's to serve, right?
Mm-hmm.
To better serve our families, our marriages, to serve the church, and ultimately to serve God, right? Because you cannot give of yourself if you don't have any mastery of self, and if you don't know yourself. Right. And so that's where the birth of Servium was originally. And I didn't even know it would have been the name of my institute, because I didn't even know this institute was going to be a thing when I was in college. It wasn't until 6 years later that the institute was born, because of what I talked about in our first show, right? Is this kind of not feeling satisfied with modern mental health, trying my best to apply the faith into the work that I was doing, and then recognizing the need to help men specifically on a global level, getting certified as a high performance coach, learning about how to actually teach high performance habits and coach men to apply it through the high performance habits program, and then using all that wisdom merged with Thomistic psychology to create what is now the virtue growth engine under Servium Institute.
Yeah, and for the listeners out there, both my wife and I are life professed Third Order Dominicans. That's why you kind of see this the Dominican shield behind me. And obviously, I think, Keone, just by that nature of having parents, there's an element where maybe someday, right, son, you'll be discerning on whether or not you become a life professed Third Order Dominican. You're already speaking the language of Aquinas, and I'm sure making Saint Dominic, Saint Thomas, Saint Catherine, and many Dominican saints, they're proud. So let's go back, Keone, to the issue that we're seeing in mental health. We know that mental health is an issue. We know that, is this just John and Keone's opinion on the fact that modern psychology falls short? We know there's a body-soul composite, but they seem to be missing when it comes to the soul, and therefore the moral health, of which is tied to the mental health. What more thoughts do we have on that?
Yeah, I think the modern psychological approach, because it misses the understanding of the soul, how can it really help us as Catholics truly grow, right? because it's missing a huge part of what we all know, right? And this is why a lot of people come to us, because they went to a secular counselor, and the person was nice. They learned maybe some tools as a result of that, maybe some grounding tools, some breathing techniques, whatever the case is, and that could be good on a foundational level to learn how to control the body, etc. But at some point, there reaches a ceiling because they do not comment on or focus on the soul, on the integration of the spiritual, right? But we have a spiritual component to us, right? There's an aspect of our nature that is immaterial, and there's really nothing really out there that intimately connects the body and the soul into the work of healing and growth, right? And so there's a problem here. And I think this is why a lot of people have this, like, modern psychology, modern therapy is wacky, right? I know, especially amongst men, right? They're like, there's no way I'm going to a therapist. You want me to go see a shrink, right? And I think in some ways it's justified, this aversion to modern mental health, right? You go to any public university, go to their psychology department and look at everybody in the faculty and in those classrooms. And trust me, I went to a public school for my graduate program, and you get some characters.
You almost think Batman's going to come out.
Yeah.
Because we're in Gotham City over here.
It is just something. Yeah, there's clearly a problem, right? And so I think as Catholics, we have there is a certain truth to having an aversion to it. But it doesn't mean mental health is the issue. It doesn't mean, coaching or personal development is the issue. It's the lens by which we pursue that end, right? It's the approach to doing so that is the problem, because we all should be seeking to grow in mental health, right? And Aquinas talks about it himself, right? About mental health and what it is, right? We must operate the way God designed us, right? Cooperate with our nature, right? If we do not do that, it leads to our own demise and to the demise of our relationships, those around us. So it's not mental health that's the issue. It's that we've forgotten what it is at its root, and we let the world tell us what it is. And when you do that, what happens? They tend to distort what is true. And it's our mission to revitalize what it really is, to re-embrace it, to call Catholics to know it well, because you look early 1900s and before that, right? The lives of the great authors, mystics, saints, they're talking about Thomistic psychology in their writings. They use the terms of the faculties of the human person. Where is it nowadays? And you don't really see it. And so we've lost amongst the faithful this language of Thomistic psychology and who the human person truly is. And hopefully through this show, and even at Servium Institute in the coaching program, right, we want to help men especially, but couples, women, embrace what has always been taught, right? Who the human person is, what are the faculties that make us up as a human person, and now what do I do practically to be the best version of myself?
Now, one of the things that people probably would agree on is freedom is good. Freedom's a good thing. Right. So when we think about going to even the catechism where it talks about freedom and responsibility, it says freedom is the power rooted in reason and will to act or not to act. By free will, one shapes one's own life. So we would say, people are always looking for autonomy in our culture today, right, Keone? They're always looking for the ability to do what you want to do, and they don't understand true freedom. We talked about this in our last show, but maybe does it make sense for us to start to crack open? Because we got plenty to go through when we try to get into the mind of Aquinas. You talked about the car getting under the hood. Are all the parts working in the right order? Should we start to talk into and introduce our listeners into the faculties? How about we go into the faculties and break it down, distilling the great mind of Aquinas to something that our listeners can hopefully understand and take away from?
Yeah, let's start with a brief introduction, right? So as I said, we are a body-soul composite, right? And remember, if you pop open the hood of that body-soul composite, you're going to see parts. Well, because body is material and soul is immaterial, we have certain parts or faculties, right, as Aquinas calls it, that are immaterial. And there's other faculties that are immaterial and material, right? Now, just for the listeners to know, there is no faculty that is strictly material, because I mean, without the soul, we are dead, right? Nothing works, right? So we need a soul. This is what enlivens us, right? It's what strengthens us, animates us. So we have certain faculties that are strictly immaterial, and that's what Aquinas calls the higher faculties, right? And so I like to give like a business example, right? When you look at a business, you have like the executives. These are the higher ups. These are kind of oversee the success, the mission, right? The values, the future of the company. These are what we can call the higher faculties within. We have our executives. The first is the intellect. We've all, I think most of us heard of intellect, right? And you're intellectual, etc. Your intellect is an immaterial faculty that is ordered towards the universal truth, ordered towards truth. Ultimately, that is God, right? Truth itself, right? So our intellect is what I like to call the CEO of the faculties. It's the faculty of the soul that sees the big picture. It sees universal truth. It's able to understand reality. It's able to grasp abstract concepts. The fact that you and I are even talking about mental health today, right? I can't like hold mental health in my hands, right? I can't put mental health on this table in front of me, but we can understand what mental health is and is not through the intellect. And so it's important that our intellect is rightly ordered. It actually understands truth. It is seeking truth. It ponders and meditates on what is true. Because when it's led astray by lies, by our environment that feeds us sin and distortion, what happens is, as we know, sin, it darkens the intellect. Now our CEO loses sight on what is true. At one time, maybe it had a good understanding of its values on what is right, but it kind of got lost as life went on. It kind of led, it helped, or it started to listen to, I should say, it started to listen to certain influences, maybe other companies, certain friends, other higher ups, maybe its own employees and those underneath them. And as a result, what happens? He gets a false understanding of what is true, what is good, what is in the best interest of the company. And so what happens? It starts to fail. The person, maybe the CEO is forced to resign, right? And that's for us to recognize, right? Our intellect is the CEO, right? Do we strengthen it? Do we work to maintain it? Do we perfect it through virtue, or is our intellect corrupted?
Yeah, no, such a great point. Good way to use the business analogy, and we'll kind of continue to unpack. We started with intellect as one of the higher faculties. We'll revisit that, come back. There's another faculty within that higher realm, and we'll be addressing that when we get back from the break.
Hey, Terry Rodriguez. I'm a monthly donor here in Phoenix, Arizona. Retired Phoenix cop. And I've met Jesse before. And I just want to tell you guys were on fire yesterday on the Terry and Jesse show. You guys were on fire. I went to bed thinking, man, what an unwinnable war. But when I got up, I listened to you guys. You guys are doing good work, man. You're doing God's work, and keep doing it. I know it gets exhausting sometimes, but there's people out here that really need the inspiration and the evangelization that you guys are giving us. So my best to you, and I'm Eddie Rodriguez, and I'm a monthly donor and proud of it.
This is a minute meditation from Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Everyone who believes in him has eternal life with him. John chapter 3 verse 15. In the words of St. Thomas Aquinas, faith is in no way a burden or a yoke imposed on mankind. Far from it. Faith is an immense benefit, because it commences life in us even on this earth. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us the gift of faith. Help us to remain firm in our faith throughout our lives, and to strive to increase it, day by day.
This has been a minute meditation from Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Terry Barber here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I'm encouraging people to support realestateforlife.org. They'll have a pro-life agent for you. California's laws for the family are really bad. If you have a young family and you can afford to get out of California, get out and make a new life somewhere where you're not going to have the repressive laws. For example, if your son wants to change his sex and you don't want that to happen, the school can take your child away from you. Yes, that's how bad it is, folks. That's why I'm encouraging you to go to realestateforlife.org. God bless you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Welcome back. The great angelic doctor says in his Summa that the moral quality of the passion depends on the reasons ordering them. So you can already see there, Keone, that the great mind of Aquinas is kind of tying emotional health bound to virtue, right? So that he knows that there's this emotional mental health that is bound to virtue because the passions have to be governed by, again, reason, intellect, and the will. So when we left into the break, you were talking about kind of the CEO, right? The intellect ordered towards the universal truth. Anything else to add on that, or do we move on to the other higher faculty?
Yeah, I guess one thing to keep in mind when we talk about universal truth, it's truth that transcends a particular instance, right? So for example, it's your intellect that's able to understand like what tableness is, right? Like we all understand what a table is, right? Now I can give you a particular example, right? Like my dining table in my room, that's something I can see and touch, right? But your intellect isn't concerned really with that one particular table. What your intellect is able to see is what makes up a table. And that's the universal, right? What transcends Keone's personal experience, right? And that's why it is an immaterial faculty. It's a faculty of the soul, right? You think about it, like how can we in modern mental health not see that we have a soul, right? Because we can't possibly understand things based solely on what I see, what I taste, what I hear, right? Because I mean, you think about it. When I was in school and I learned about what a triangle was, and elementary school math, I didn't look at every single triangle in existence, but I understood what a triangle is. So any triangle I see now in my life, I look at it in light of what the truth of a triangle is, right? The fact that I can even grasp something beyond what I can see means there's something beyond the physical. There's something beyond what my body is capable of seeing. And that is why we need to look at the function of the soul. And the CEO of the faculties is that intellect. So that was the only thing I want to say about the CEO, the intellect.
Okay. So moving on, so we can break down make sure that our listeners' cars are working as appropriate. What's the next faculty we want to talk about?
Yeah. The next is the will. Okay. So our intellect and our will are the two higher faculties. These are the executives. Okay. The intellect is the CEO, and the will we can think of, just to continue on with this business analogy, the will is the COO, whose job it is to execute the good, right? So when it's working well, the CEO is well formed, does its research, takes its trainings, right? Has good counsel, a good board. It's able to understand what is best. And then it says, based off of what the options are, here's what we're going to do. Here's our plan of action, sends that over to the COO, the will. The will, when it's rightly ordered, is able to look at that and say, yep, this is good. I agree with you, intellect. I see this as desirable. This is truly good. And then it carries it out, right? Takes the next steps. It informs the rest of the employees, the rest of the staff to put this into effect for the betterment of the company, right? So for us, I'm able to understand the truth of what I should be doing, right? It is good for a husband to do this in marriage. And because I know that it is good, here's what I'm going to do when I get off work and go see my wife, right? I'm going to give her a hug and a kiss. I'm going to check in with her. And then I'm going to take over, right? As the general of the platoon to say, okay, what needs to get done? Is it finishing off dishes? Is it making sure that the kitchen's clean? Is it making sure the kids are okay? Right. And then my will sees that as good. Hey, that is good to actually take care of your family in that way, to show up after work in that way. And so what does your will do? It carries it out. Then I actually walk out of my office. I go to my to my kitchen, right? And I actually greet my wife. I give her a kiss. I put those dishes away. I pick up my child and check in. That's the will executing what the intellect told it was good, right? And so in order for the will, the COO, to execute, one, it needs to see it as good because the will is ordered towards the universal good, but it also needs to understand what to do practically. If it stays abstract, the will probably not be moved because it doesn't know what to do. And how many of us feel stuck in that? I know like something's off. I know maybe something needs to be better. I probably should communicate better with my wife, but I don't know what to do. The intellect hasn't reflected on it, hasn't sought counsel, it hasn't understood the next step, what is proper. And so it doesn't really inform the will what to specifically do. It's kind of like as a parent, right? When you tell your kids, right, go make the bed or go clean your room, and you have a 4-year-old. Your 4-year-old has no clue what cleaning your room means, right? In my mind, I already know what that means. That means, oh, you got to make the bed, you have to put the clothes away, put them in the drawers, right? You have to pick up the clothes off the floor, etc., right? But if we don't give the specific directives to the will, here's what to do specifically, your will probably not be moved because it doesn't know what it's being asked to do. And so your will just kind of sits there, right? And what it's going to do is going to choose something it knows. Oh, but I know we can do this, right? And when the will acts that out, it starts to distort the functioning because it doesn't choose what is ultimately good. It chooses what it thinks, what it feels is good, right? So, Dad, any other thoughts on the intellect and the will?
No, it's funny. I was just thinking about like a personal interaction when you said like not knowing, telling the 4-year-old, and I'm thinking back to a shout out to Leandro. We had a Brazilian foreign exchange student that stayed with us for about 3.5 years in high school career, in Keone's high school career. And I remember telling him, he was new to the English language, and I told him, hey, I need you to load the dishwasher, right? We were just incorporating him into the chores. And he was looking at me like, okay, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? And so he just kind of like looked at me, and I was like, I'm using words this young man does not know, right? And so it's this idea of like, he's going to try to figure it out, right? He just starts like, putting stuff away, but he wasn't really loading the dishwasher. He's just like, maybe I just keep washing these dishes, right? So there's an element of just understanding, right? And in the right context, right? So the intellect, really understanding the circumstances around a situation. And we'll start to break out, listeners. There's a lot to the virtue of prudence and where the intellect is going to come into play. But yeah, I think I like the idea of the chief executive officer and the chief operating officer. And if they're all doing the things they should be doing, essentially, right, that organism is going to be running really well, like a well-oiled machine. But if they're not, they can be running efficient in the sense of darkness or sin, right? So there's some people that are really good at sinning, right? We're like we're a fallen creature. We're really good at lying, or we're really good at stealing, or really good at the vices and the vicious acts of this world. And really what we're trying to do is, obviously course correct and get ourselves reordered.
Yep. So we have the CEO and we have the COO. Remember, those are the higher faculties. Those are the faculties of the soul. And it is all the faculties that are lower, which means there's a physical element, there's a material element, they operate through the body. Those are like the employees. And those faculties, and we can get into those, Dad, and let me know what you think, but those faculties should be in service to the faculties of the soul, right? And I want to make a point, and Dad, you can go into the lower faculties if you want, but I want to make a point that we're talking about the CEO and the COO, right? The intellect and the will. For modern mental health to not understand the soul, you're ignoring the executives, but you're trying to help the company, which makes zero sense, right? You can make some changes by, hey, interviewing and working with these employees, giving them some trainings, right? Maybe, having a conversation with the project manager, sending him on a nice retreat, giving him some tools. That's great. But if the CEO and the COO are knuckleheads, they don't even understand what to do, how to run a company, right? They're not constantly training themselves, moderating their own behavior. Do you think that business is going to continue to run well? There is no chance. You can help the employees all day long. It doesn't matter if the CEO and the COO are not on the same page, because all of a sudden, even though that one branch or that project manager is doing an A+ job, guess what? The CEO and the COO can shut down the whole business because of some fraudulent activity or a scandal or whatever the case is, right? So we need to make sure that the intellect and the will are intimately a part of our work when it comes to the growth in virtue and the pursuit of mental health. When we're trying to grow to be a saint, right? We're like pursuing this seriously.
Yeah.
You need to understand the intellect and the will are paramount in perfecting and strengthening through the virtues, which we'll get into, right? But these are the executives. These are the faculties of the soul.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that point, then I think we should probably get into the lower faculties. Is when you have the CEO and the CEO that are operating outside of virtue, right? They can leave well-intended, virtued employees down the wrong path. And so let's go to the other side of that. Whereas you also can have, right, the natives going crazy and running rampant as well, right? So let's talk about the lower faculties. So we got the executives. We got your higher faculties, intellect, and the will. What's next on the list of Aquinas's Thomistic psychology?
Yeah, I guess we'll go in order of maybe rank, we should say. So we have our CEO and the COO, the intellect and the will. Next in line would be, I don't want to get into the abstract or the agent intellect because it's just, we don't need to get into that. But the next would be your cogitative power. Okay. For those of you who have some familiarity to, the human person, modern science, mental health, we often hear the terms executive functioning or your prefrontal cortex, right? You can even call your adult self, whatever you want to call it, right? This is essentially your cogitative power, okay? Your cogitative power is like the mini intellect. Think of it as if the intellect is the CEO, you can think of the cogitative power as your project manager. And you each have a project manager that is unique to you. And it's the project manager, it's our cogitative power's job to handle the day-to-day experiences personal to you. Like I said with that table, right? I've experienced a different set of tables than you, the audience, right? I haven't seen every table that you've seen, right? And so your tables may have been different in material and quality and size and shape, whatever the case is, right? Although we can all understand what a table is, you've encountered certain tables that are different, right? And so we want to get into the cogitative power and the mini intellect because that's probably where most people go astray. They don't have a moderated cogitative power, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big faculty we got to get ordered.
Yeah, and that's the one that we got to probably focus on for a lot of different reasons. So we'll get back into the cogitative power with Keone and John on Ascend Through Virtue. See you after the break.
Sirach 11:24 says, "Do not say, I am self-sufficient. What harm can come to me now?" According to St. Catherine of Siena, presumption is like vermin burrowing at the root of the tree of our soul. If we do not uproot it with great care and humility, it will eventually destroy the soul. May God keep us from all presumption of mind and heart, and realize that we depend on Him for everything.
This message is for you. A great man once said that evil is powerless if the good are unafraid. Well, you and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness. We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose this war, and in so doing lose this great way of freedom of ours, history will report with the greatest astonishment that those that had the most to lose did the least to prevent it from happening. Well, I think it's high time now that we ask ourselves if we still even know the freedoms that were intended for us by our founding fathers. Every generation of Americans needs to know that freedom exists, not to do what you like, but having the right to do what you ought. You weren't made to fit in, my brothers and sisters. You are born to stand out. Set yourself apart from this corrupt generation. Be saints. God bless you.
Terry Barber here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I'm encouraging people to support realestateforlife.org. They'll have a pro-life agent for you. California's laws for the family are really bad. If you have a young family and you can afford to get out of California, get out and make a new life somewhere where you're not going to have the repressive laws. For example, if your son wants to change his sex and you don't want that to happen, the school can take your child away from you. Yes, that's how bad it is, folks. That's why I'm encouraging you to go to realestateforlife.org. God bless you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
The newly anointed doctor of the church, St. John Henry Newman, says that knowledge is one thing, but virtue is another. And that's what we're here at Ascend Through Virtue. We're going to try to unpack the concept of virtue. We're going to try to take it from its maybe it's abstract to you, maybe it's not. But for those of you that are looking to grow in holiness and ultimately to reach that ultimate end of being with God one day, we want to help journey with you in understanding the virtues. So, we left off, Keone, on just kind of breaking open cogitative power. So let's pick it up from there and help the listeners understand exactly what is this thing called cogitative power.
Yeah, your cogitative power, think of this as it's your project manager. What it's doing every day is it's making associations. So it's taking what you see, what you hear, what you smell, etc. Everything that you are experiencing through your external senses, sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. And what it does is it looks at that information and it compares it to what you have experienced, right, in the past. So it looks at those interactions, those experiences in the now, and it does a quick association assessment, right? Analyzes the filing cabinet, right? So that would be in our brain, our storage unit, right, in the hippocampus. That's our memory. Right? So now we look at all the memories, and it does a really good job of saying, hey, this is like that. Right. The fact that I look at my dad and I say, that's my dad, right? That's your cogitative power. I look at what I see, the image of my dad, and I go back into my memory and my all the series of memories. And, oh, yep, that's the right person. Right. Because I could have, hey, that there's someone that looks like my dad, right? If I went into like a basketball game or something, right. Or somewhere in public, that kind of looks like him, but I'm not sure, right? This is my cogitative power making these associations. Right. And so its job is to make an initial assessment. Is this like that or is it not like that? Right. This is why I can go to a church and like, whoa, that's not a Catholic church. Right. Because I know that this is not like what I'm used to. I've been to Catholic churches my whole life. Something is off here. My cogitative power is making that association. Something is wrong or something. This is right. I know the Catholic Church. I've been here before. There's certain hallmarks of a Catholic church that we can recognize. Right. It also makes an assessment of, is it good or bad? Based off of what I know is similar or dissimilar, it's like this or it's not, then I say the next step is it good now or is it bad? Right? And then the last step is it useful or is it harmful? Can I use it if it's good or is it harmful? Is it threatening if it's bad? Right. And so this is what informs our decisions on a day-to-day level. Right. But our project manager, although it has a certain level of authority and influence, right? It has its hands in the employees, its team, so to speak. It can sometimes have a tendency to go rogue and miss the bigger picture. It doesn't consult with the CEO, the intellect. And so it only focuses on what it sees. And it doesn't check in with the CEO, the intellect, who sees the bigger picture. So as a result, we start to make some assumptions. Right? We start to make some judgments that aren't really true. They're understandable. Hey, I see where you're coming from, but they're not grounded in reality, the bigger picture. And when you start to act those associations out, you build habits. And those habits become lies and influence bad actions as a result. So that's a cogitative power. Any thoughts on that, Dad?
Yeah, one of the kind of metaphors, it may not be perfect, but I was thinking about like, we're obviously bringing in, it's like the bridge between the sense knowledge, right? So here the senses kind of I'm thinking of like a jury metaphor. Like here you have like the senses are bringing in the evidence. Now the intellect knows the law, right? But the cogitative power is like the jury deciding. Right. So you've got the judge over it, but then the jury is really that cogitative power taking in the things that it knows. And to your point, if it can kind of go rogue, right? We've seen mistrials right? We've seen people get a guilty verdict that and wrongfully charged because of a faulty jury, right? And so I think in a way, when we think about the cogitative power, again, just a metaphor to be able to look at it, but very powerful. And I think when we go back to even our training, Keone, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the things that, Kyle Clement, who's I know a friend of Virgin Most Powerful and has been on many of the shows, was talking about, where the demons typically operate is in that memory emotion interface, right? And that's kind of where you have the cogitative power, right, operating in that same realm, where this is where it's super powerful. Like you said, that cogitative power can really run amok and get rogue on us if we don't deal with the formation piece. We talk about malformation.
Yeah. And I want to stick to the cogitative power just because it's such an important faculty, and we can kind of close with that faculty, right? Because when you find yourself struggling, for the listeners out there, when you're struggling to overcome a wound, or you have a resentment, or you have this fear, it's because your cogitative power has developed associations, and you've been responding to those associations, taking them at face value. And now you've built habits that have shaped your nature as a result. So your body only knows that association, right? And when you act that out over time, just like you said, the judge can make an error in what is right to do moving forward, what the overall assessment is, the big picture. The CEO can start to not understand what is best, not understand what is true. This is how we get to the point where, if I had, let's say that there was a bad breakup relationship, right? A woman had a really bad breakup. The guy was a jerk, wasn't virtuous. Okay. And then that really rocked her. She was really hoping it'd turn out. He was really telling her everything that, she wanted to hear. Right. But man, then he just betrayed her. Okay. Then she remembers that. Then there's another fine gentleman who maybe he talks in a very similar way, tells her what she wants to hear, but he actually backs it up. He's a virtuous man, right? Little does she know, he frequents the sacraments. He has a very holy Catholic family, but she says, I've heard this before. Right? I've been told all these things. And you know what? You kind of look like him too. It's kind of similar height. He was in the sports, you're into sports, right? And so because of my cogitative power saying, what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing is similar to that guy. This is harmful. This is dangerous. You're going to get, screwed over again. There's going to be some betrayal happening. So you better protect yourself. So then what happens? There's a great guy who's honestly trying to lead, to get to know her, trying to court well, but her guard's up. She doesn't respond. Maybe she's half, 1 foot in, 1 foot out in the relationship. And the gentleman's like, what's going on? Like, I thought I was doing everything I should have for her. But in her mind, what happened? Her cogitative power took a personal experience, a singular experience, and compared it to what she's experiencing now. And she made a judgment. And that judgment, we all know, right? All of us listening, right? Because we're not maybe in the thralls of that. We're able to say like, that wasn't really rational. Hey, like I know you had a bad experience, right? But this guy, like, he's not the same person. You got to look at the big picture. Did you talk to the family? Right? We can now have this reasoning. This is when the CEO comes down to the ground level, right? Has that meeting with the project manager and says, okay, whoa, what's going on here? Right? And then it checks its work. And the project manager's like, oh, my bad. So sorry, CEO, boss man. What I was thinking was, he was telling me these things, and I mean, do you not remember what my ex-boyfriend would say? And the Intellect, the CEO says, I get you, but did you consider this? Did you ask that question? Hey, did you talk to him about XYZ? Hey, did you meet his family? No. You see how you're making a limited, right, information assessment? And so your judgment is prone to error. This is the blessing and the curse of the cogitative power. It can make quick decisions, right? And man, it's helpful when it's rightly ordered. But when it's disordered, we're in trouble. And you start to see the distortion happen for us, and our emotions follow that assessment as a result.
It's almost like Keone, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but it's almost like she took a particular lie and put it and replaced the universal truth, right?
Yes.
That we as individuals have free will, We have freedom to love, freedom to choose. And so, like you said, in her mind, hey, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, this is a duck, right? Versus looking at a particular instance where there was bad intentions or whatever it was with that first example of the man that she was using. And now she just applies it to every single man that she meets, regardless, right? So now it becomes her universal truth. And then this is where we start to see some of the issues where, again, to your point, there's a quick judgment. And then you see that play out. I mean, the example you used was one that never happens, right? Where ever. Yeah, exactly. It's always happening. If you can't, smell the sarcasm out there. But ultimately, is that another way? So let's think about the cogitative power, a little bit more. What any other things we can unpack? Because it's, again, these are the things for the listeners that we're going to have to continuously kind of help educate, reiterate, and get more familiar with to be able to distill what Aquinas is trying to teach us to learn more about ourselves and how we operate. Anything else on the cogitative power, Kenny?
I mean, unless you have anything, I think really what the cogitative power is doing is it's assessing what you're experiencing and comparing it to what you've experienced in the past, and it's making a quick judgment. And then it sends that information up to the intellect, the CEO, and says, here's what I got. And then your intellect takes the overall principles as a result of that. Now your intellect has going back to the ex-boyfriend, right? Now your intellect has an assessment of what men, right? What is the concept of man? What is the concept of a relationship? Whom to trust? Now the general has been taken from these lies. And if I don't assess my judgments on a day-to-day basis, you now get to the point where you say, I can never trust a man. I wasn't meant to be in a relationship. How did you get to that point? We're making such a general, right, belief. Like, really, men can't be trusted? You're not meant to be in a relationship? Well, because of the day-to-day assessment your cogitative power made, and it was feeding that information, right, to your intellect, just like the jury, right, being presented with all this information, right? And the jury wasn't synthesizing and assessing it well, and just keeps like, here you go, judge, here's what we have, right? And the judge is like, well, what am I supposed to, right? Here it is. And it makes an error in its judgment as a result.
Yeah, I think basically if we just kind of summarize that piece, when you talk about the intellect dealing with the universal truths, so using that example, it universally knows man, justice, danger kind of thing. Whereas we know the cogitative power is dealing with a particular reason, right? It's dealing with this man, right? This perhaps injustice, this danger that is now associated with their lived experience at that moment, right? So you see how complicated this can get, friends, if we don't have a well-formed understanding of how we're designed. And so we're gonna leave it there for now. We got to let that marinate for you as a crowd to help understand a little bit of the faculties and the way it works. When we come back on our next show, we'll start to talk about the lower faculties and how those impact the inner workings of the car, if you will. And so I'd be remiss to say, hey, join us at surveyinstitute.com. Sign up for our newsletter, check us out, and also be on the lookout for the upcoming men's conference at the end of September in Phoenix, Arizona. Visit us at worldablaze.org to sign up for that, where both Keone and I will be there talking about virtue. God bless you and keep you, and we'll see you on the next show.
Saint Faustina's Prayer for Priests. O my Jesus, I beg thee on behalf of the whole Church, grant it love and the light of thy Spirit, and give power to the words of priests, so that hardened hearts might be brought to repentance and return to thee, O Lord. Lord, give us holy priests. Thou thyself maintain them in holiness. O divine and great High Priest, may the power of thy mercy accompany them everywhere, and protect them from the devil's traps and snares, which are continually being set for the souls of priests. May the power of thy mercy, O Lord, shatter and bring to naught all that might tarnish the sanctity of priests. For thou canst do all things. Amen. Virgin most powerful, pray for us.
Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.